Unbelievable. Absolutely mind-blowingly ridiculous. Welcome back to Street Hoops, the only place on the internet where we do not play corporate games, we do not sugarcoat the facts, and we give you the raw, unfiltered truth from the perspective of your boy, Dre Fiver. Man, I am sitting here today completely disgusted, utterly exhausted, and flat out sick and tired of the absolute disrespect, the micromanagement, and the psychological warfare being waged against the greatest young talent this sport has ever seen. Nothing is ever enough for you, is it, Stephanie White? No matter how many times Caitlin Clark puts on her superhero cape, steps onto that hardwood, and completely saves your coaching career over and over and over again, you still choose to stand on that sideline and act like she is the primary problem with your basketball team. What we just saw uncover in that video clip is a level of coaching malpractice that makes my blood boil, and it plays a massive, undeniable part in why the Indiana Fever suffered one of the most embarrassing, historic first quarter debacles in recent WNBA history. We are talking about a generational superstar who literally leads the entire league in assists, a player who dictates the gravitational pull of every single defensive scheme she encounters, and yet her own head coach is standing on the sideline completely crashing out, yelling at her to pass the ball like she is some selfish, toxic ball hog in a middle school rec league. You have Stephanie White and Brianne January standing on the bench, frantically clapping their hands like trained seals, screaming out, "Move it, move it." The absolute millisecond Caitlin Clark gets a switch or tries to survey the floor to create an advantage. My personal opinion on this is simple. This is an absolute joke, a total embarrassment, and it shows a complete lack of security and awareness from a coaching staff that should be building statues of this girl instead of trying to break her spirit on national television. Think about the sheer audacity it takes to yell at Caitlin Clark to move the ball when she is literally the only individual on the entire Indiana Fever roster who consistently searches for her teammates, manipulates passing lanes, and creates easy high percentage looks out of thin air. According to extensive tracking metrics widely publicized across major basketball analytical platforms, when Caitlin Clark is off the floor or forced to surrender the ball early in the possession, the Fever's offensive efficiency drops to a level that is almost unwatchable for the average fan. Yet, as reported by Standard Sports Broadcasting Networks during the live feed, the audio clearly captures Stephanie White losing her absolute mind, screaming, "Move it, move it," as if Caitlin is holding onto the ball for 20 seconds trying to pad her own statistics. And you know what the craziest part about this whole toxic dynamic is? You don't ever see Stephanie White yell at Kelsey Mitchell to pass the ball. Kelsey Mitchell can catch the ball at the top of the key, put her head down, completely ignore three wide open teammates on the perimeter, and execute a highly contested isolation drive into a crowd of three defenders, and Stephanie White will sit on that bench completely silent, offering nothing but golf claps. But the absolute second Caitlin Clark commands a switch, stops for a brief microsecond to read the defensive coverage, and prepares to operate out of the pick and roll, the entire coaching staff starts throwing a collective temper tantrum on the sideline. It is a disgusting double standard that makes absolutely no basketball sense, and I am completely convinced that this constant unnecessary screaming from the bench is the exact reason why Caitlin Clark looked completely checked out and mentally exhausted during that miserable first quarter. Let's really break down the absolute disaster that was the first quarter of this game, because it serves as the ultimate proof of how Stephanie White's coaching philosophy is actively suffocating the life out of this team's offense. The Indiana Fever managed to score a pathetic, miserable 6 points in the entire first 15 minutes of action, looking completely lost, disorganized, and utterly devoid of confidence. As I watched the tape back, my jaw was literally on the floor because I could see the exact moment where Caitlin Clark just checked out of the game mentally, completely defeated by the reality that her own coaches were actively rooting against her natural basketball instincts. Imagine being the best playmaker on the planet and having your coach scream, "Move it," at you every single time you attempt to create a play, to the point where you just say, "Fine, you want me to get rid of the ball? I'll just throw it to a teammate and stand in the corner doing absolutely nothing." That is exactly what happened, and the result was a historic offensive drought that looked more like a tragedy than a professional basketball game. This team has historically averaged around 25 points in the opening frame throughout the season, yet they were sitting there halfway through the quarter with just 3 points on the scoreboard, and instead of taking accountability for an incredibly poor game plan, the coaches decided to channel all their frustration into screaming and clapping at number 22. It is disgusting, it is disrespectful, and it makes me completely sick to my stomach because Caitlin Clark has single-handedly elevated this entire franchise from an irrelevant, lottery-bound afterthought into the most talked-about ticket in global sports. My personal opinion is that Stephanie White and Brianne January are suffering from a massive ego problem where they feel the need to assert their authority over a superstar player just to prove to the world that they are the ones running the show. According to inside reports published by standard sports media outlets covering the team's internal dynamics, there's been an ongoing underlying tension regarding how much freedom Clark should be granted within the offensive system. But you see, when your system results in a 6-point quarter, your system is trash, period, end of discussion. You cannot argue with the reality of the scoreboard, and the reality is that when Caitlin Clark is allowed to be the primary engine, to hold the ball, to probe the defense, and to make decisions based on her elite court vision, the Fever look like a championship contender. When you force her to become a passive off-ball passer who just swings the ball around the perimeter to players who cannot create their own shot, you get the absolute garbage we witnessed in that opening stretch. It is completely ridiculous for a coaching staff to treat the league leader in assists like she is a selfish ball hog, and it shows a total lack of fundamental basketball understanding that makes me wonder how these individuals secured their jobs in the first place. But the absolute betrayal didn't even stop on the court, because if you think the in-game micromanagement was bad, you need to look at what transpired during the post-game press conference, which was an absolute masterclass in throwing your best player straight under the bus. After the Fever somehow managed to escape with a victory, entirely because Caitlin Clark went out there in the second half and completely balled out with 24 points and 9 assists, a reporter asked Stephanie White a direct question about how the team responded to a weird first quarter and how they need to manage Caitlin's growing technical foul count. Now, if you are a real head coach who has your players back, a coach who understands the literal physical assault that Caitlin Clark endures every single game, your first instinct is to protect her. You stand up at that microphone and you tell the media that Caitlin plays with an unmatched competitive fire, that she is getting hit illegally on every single possession without a whistle, and that you will gladly take a technical foul yourself to defend her from the referees. But what does Stephanie White do instead? She sits up there, look at her face, completely indifferent, and says, yeah, she's got to be aware. Certainly, I think there are some technical fouls we could do without, and we will continue to remind her that she has to have an awareness. Are you kidding me right now? You are going to lecture the face of women's basketball about awareness and control when she just got hit with her 5th technical foul of the season for the crime of literally clapping her hands in a competitive basketball game. As reported by ESPN in their post-game breakdown of the officiating, the referee explicitly stated that Caitlin Clark received a technical foul simply for clapping her hands, which the league office apparently deemed as form of taunting. It is the most soft, pathetic, laughable whistle in the history of professional sports, and yet instead of calling out the referees for a blatant double standard, Stephanie White decides to join in on the media narrative and lecture her own superstar about poise and composure. My personal opinion on this is that Stephanie White is a complete hypocrite who is completely comfortable letting Caitlin Clark take all the heat, all the physical punishment, and all the media scrutiny while she sits on the sideline twitching and collecting a paycheck. If anyone on that floor needed a lesson in awareness, it was Stephanie White, who should have been out there getting ejected from the game to defend her players after watching Aaliyah Boston get hit in her already blackened eye and watching Kelsey Mitchell get her lip split open by a rogue Phoenix elbow. But no, White prefers to stay completely quiet during the actual battle, completely failing to protect her team, and then uses the post-game press conference to sound like a rigid textbook lecturer telling the world that Caitlin needs to control her emotions. It is a joke, man, a total and complete joke, and it makes me realize that this coaching staff is completely out of their depth when it comes to managing a talent of this magnitude. Let's talk about that fourth quarter skirmish for a minute, because it exposes the ultimate breakdown of leadership on this team. The game turned into an absolute old-school street fight with players screaming, shoving, and 5 different technical fouls being handed out in a single possession. When the media asked Stephanie White for her perspective on what happened during that crazy high-stakes moment, she literally looked into the cameras and said, "Yeah, I didn't really see exactly what was happening at the time because I was talking to the officials about Caitlin's technical foul. Of course, you didn't see it, Stephanie. You never see anything. You can stand on the sideline and clearly see Caitlin Clark holding the ball for 2 seconds and crash out about it. But when the entire court erupts into a literal physical altercation where your players are being targeted and swallowed up by a hostile Phoenix Mercury squad, you suddenly have no eyes." It is the most cowardly corporate response I have ever heard from a basketball coach in my entire life. Your players are out there shedding actual blood, sweat, and tears on the hardwood, fighting for their lives against a dirty team that cannot handle getting blown out, and you are going to sit there and tell the media you missed the whole thing. According to a detailed breakdown provided by Sports Illustrated following the game, White had a massive golden opportunity to publicly back her roster and send a message to the rest of the league that the Indiana Fever will not be bullied, but instead she chose to take a passive, reserved approach that completely missed the mark. My personal opinion is that Caitlin Clark and the rest of these girls are forced to pick up technical fouls and react with raw emotion on the court, precisely because they know their own head coach will not fight for them. When a player knows that their coach is just going to sit on the bench like a statue, completely passive, refusing to challenge terrible referee calls or scream at the officials when a dirty play occurs, that player is naturally going to react out of pure self-preservation. Caitlin Clark is out there playing with absolute passion, giving everything she has to a franchise that was completely in the gutter before she arrived, and when she gets an intentional elbow to the face or gets shoved to the floor right in front of a referee with no whistle, she has every right to clap her hands and express her frustration. And then, for Stephanie White to sit in the press conference and describe these emotional reactions as a breakdown of poise and composure is just a slap in the face to anyone who understands competitive sports. She literally told the media that losing your poise looks like breakdowns and turnovers. And I am sitting here thinking to myself, no, Stephanie, you are the actual breakdown. You are the biggest turnover on this entire team. Your uninspiring offensive system, your complete lack of defensive adjustments, and your inability to stand up for your players is the ultimate breakdown that this franchise is currently facing. The fact of the matter is completely undeniable, and anyone with a working set of eyes can see the truth. Out of at least 5 of the last 6 games, Caitlin Clark has single-handedly saved Stephanie White's coaching career and kept her seat from becoming an absolute scorching hot inferno. If it weren't for number 22 putting on the cape, pulling up from 35 feet, and executing flawless high-difficulty passes to rescue this team from offensive stagnation in the second half of games, the Indiana Fever would be sitting near the absolute bottom of the WNBA standings right now. The fans are completely tired of it. The media is starting to notice the massive disconnect, and the narrative surrounding this coaching staff is rapidly reaching a breaking point. You cannot continue to treat your superstar like a liability while relying entirely on her brilliance to win basketball games. It is a toxic, unsustainable relationship, and if Stephanie White does not find a way to fix her awareness, to stop screaming at Caitlin to pass the ball every time she tries to make a play, and to start publicly defending her roster against the absolute targeting they face every single night, then this front office needs to make a serious, immediate change. I am completely disgusted with how this lady handles her business, and I know for a fact that the thousands of fans watching this channel right now are completely on the same page. We are witnessing greatness being micromanaged by mediocrity, and it is the most frustrating, painful thing to watch as a basketball purist. Caitlin Clark is out there changing the entire landscape of women's sports, breaking records on a nightly basis, and bringing an unprecedented level of joy and economic prosperity to the city of Indianapolis. And she deserves a coaching staff that will run through a brick wall for her, not a staff that stands on the sideline clapping like critics at an art gallery. I want everyone reading this to understand that we are not going to sit here and let this corporate narrative pass as the truth. We are going to continue to call out the double standards, the terrible coaching decisions, and the absolute lack of support that this generational talent is receiving from her own bench. Man, this entire situation is just reaching a level of absolute absurdity that I can no longer tolerate in silence. We are talking about a historic season where every single game is a high-stakes, nationally televised event, and instead of a unified front, we are seeing a coaching staff actively trying to suppress the natural flair and instinct of a player who has literally transformed the game of basketball forever. I want you to get down in the comments section right now and let your voice be heard on this absolute drama, because your boy Dre Fiver needs to know if I am the only one who is completely losing my mind over this. Do you think Stephanie White is completely out of line for crashing out on Caitlin Clark and screaming at her to move the ball? Or do you actually believe that this coaching staff has a point? Do you think the double standard between how they treat Caitlin Clark versus how they let Kelsey Mitchell play isolation ball is actively destroying the chemistry and the offensive flow of this young team? And what are your honest thoughts on that post-game press conference where Stephanie White completely failed to have her players back after an absolute physical assault on the hardwood? Drop your unfiltered thoughts, your theories, and your analysis down below, because we are building a community here that values the absolute unvarnished truth over corporate sports PR scripts. Make sure you absolutely smash that like button if you are sick and tired of the blatant disrespect being thrown at Caitlin Clark. Comment your thoughts down below so we can get a massive high-energy debate going in the community. Share this video with every single basketball fan in your circle, and subscribe to Street Hoops with that bell notification turned all the way on so you never miss a single episode of the most raw, no-filter sports news on the internet. We are tracking this entire season with a microscope, and with another explosive matchup right around the corner on Wednesday night, you can bet everything you own that the drama is only going to get crazier from here. Stay tuned, stay blessed, protect your energy, and do not let anyone micromanage your greatness. This is your boy Dre Fiver from Street Hoops signing off. Until next time, family, peace.